No, I've never said that she was on the scene when he was killed.
Right, I know. Who was a suspicious? Who was a suspicious person? I remember you mentioning that was kind of
Michael DeWitt, the male nanny, who was living at the house. Who the police interviewed by telephone after I told them what I thought, and here he was living at the house when Kurt Cobain died, so he would be a natural person to want to talk to. He was coming and going, staying at his girlfriend's house because he said Courtney kept calling up there all the time, but he still kept coming and going at the house. We know this too because one night we were at the house, the next night when we went back, Callie had left a letter on the stairway to Kurt. So we knew that he was coming and going, and before Kurt went missing from L.A., he was a permanent resident at the house. He had his own bedroom and everything. But, they claim they investigated it as a possible homicide, but when I asked them if they talked to Callie, they said, yeah, he's out of state, but we talked to him on the phone. He's clear. Well, you don't investigate a potential suspect, even if it's a remotely potential suspect, on the telephone and then say you're done with them. You need to sit that person down and face-to-face and see if they get nervous and watch their reaction to questions and all that. So that was just one more example of really shoddy police work. Now, I have never, ever said that the police deliberately covered this up knowing that it was a murder or that they got paid off or there was a big conspiracy involving the police department or anything. What I have said is that a police department is the same as any corporation or any big business or anything else. And if they make a mistake, they cover their butts, And that's what happened here. When a private investigator from California comes up there and says, hey, maybe you should look at this a little closer, they naturally assume, well, wait a second, if we made a mistake here, and we get corrected by some PI from California, how's that going to look in the media? Little did they know, since they don't know me, I wouldn't have done that to them. I would have given them all the credit in the world if they would have done their job after I talked to them. I wouldn't have gone out there trying to say, yeah, I straightened those guys out. But I know that's what they were thinking, what Sergeant Cameron was thinking. And you see, I encourage people to watch shows like Dateline and 48 Hours because you see cases like this all the time that are similar. They're just not celebrities, but they're private individuals. The police do a terrible job investigating. They arrest the wrong person. They'll even come along later on. Somebody's on death row, and they'll find new DNA evidence, and they'll prove that this person that they put on death row was not guilty. He gets released by the court, and another person gets arrested. The DNA evidence proves that that person was guilty and confesses to the crime and gets sent to prison. And then they interview the detective and the district attorney who prosecuted the first person, and those two people will still say, inevitably, I still think we had the right guy. Unbelievable. They just won't admit that they made a mistake.
One of the shows I did, because I was trying to get all sides of the story, so I get Courtney Love's dad, Courtney Love's father, Hank Harrison. I don't know what he's doing today, but he came on the show and essentially said, I do think Courtney killed him. Her own father.
Well,
now he as a detective, you're saying, and you did point out that Hank Harrison is not a great witness because he's got a shady background himself. I know that, right?
Well, it goes deeper than that. I mean, he called me immediately when he heard about what I was doing and started up communications. And of course, first thing he wanted to do was get together with me and write a book. And my gut reaction to that, without saying it out loud, is, yeah, you're a great father. You'll sell your own daughter down the river just to write a book, and that's what he's been doing ever since. He's tried to get publicity for himself, and he's succeeded to some extent by selling his own daughter down the river. And, if my daughter committed a murder, and I believe that she did, that she was involved, I would be involved privately in counseling her and helping her and loving her unconditionally, but yet believing she should go to prison. I mean, that's my belief. Whether you love somebody or not doesn't mean that they should get off, they should be able to commit a murder. But you don't go out there publicly and start trashing your own child and talking about, he talks about her sex life openly, in interviews and stuff like that, and basically just trashes her. So my conclusion to that, after knowing him, he came to my office. We've talked for hours on the phone. We talked for hours personally, in person. My conclusion is that he is a total psychopath, and that's why Courtney is the way she is.
To your credit, Tom,
I feel sorry for Courtney.
To your credit, you wouldn't even come on my show when he was on.
No.
Where he was agreeing with you, and he thought she was involved, but because of his credibility, you didn't want to come on the show with him.
They wanted me on Geraldo Rivera sitting next to him also, and I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't even go on the air on the telephone with him on the show.
Even though he was agreeing with Tom. Yeah. Anyway, Tom, so here we are now, and the interest around the world is just amazing. Kurt Cobain and Nirvana live on so much more than the grunge movement. As a movement goes, Kurt Cobain's interest is just kids 13, 14 years old still email you from around the world as if this was a new rock act.
It really, a lot of people, I'm sure, if they're hearing this for the first time or listening to me, they're thinking, get on with your life, get a life, do something else. Well, I am a working private investigator. I work on other cases. I make my living on other cases. My background is as a criminal investigator for the LA Sheriff's Department. So it's in my nature, if I believe somebody committed murder, not to just turn my back and walk away. But then there's the other thing that you recall, Alan, it was the copycat suicides. And we knew at the time, just a few years after Kurt died, there were over 60 kids that killed themselves. And I always said from the beginning, they didn't kill themselves because Kurt died in a car accident. They killed themselves because their young, immature minds, they thought of him as being their hero, and they looked up to him as a role model. And so when they went through some hard time in their life and depression and all that, they thought, well, hey, if it was cool for him to do it, it's cool for me. And we'd keep seeing these reports in the media and in newspapers from all over the world, kids killing themselves while playing Nirvana music and leaving suicide notes mentioning Kurt Cobain and Nirvana and all that. And there's no way, and that continues to this day. Just the other day, I got an email from a guy as an example of, telling the truth here. This is still continuing on, and I'll just read a couple of brief little lines. I, too, was one of those kids that was thinking of ending it all, not only because of Kurt, but because I, too, was in a bad place. But knowing Kurt went through the same troubles as me, I used the music and your help instead of giving in to my demons. Thanks, Tom, and I owe Kurt and you more than you could ever imagine. Now, this was just the other day, and so I get these on a regular basis. If it sounds like I'm just trying to get attention, or if you watch that documentary that we're working on, the first segment, it promotes the TV shows and the stuff we're on, and the purpose of doing that is to show the media they don't have to be afraid of attorneys. But from this point on, we're going to start focusing more on the evidence and all that in the documentary, and you'll see that happening. But I need everybody to understand I'm not only still into this at the same level I was from day one because of my background and because that's just what I do for a living, and I was in the middle of it. If I was on the outside and I just read about it someplace, I wouldn't be jumping in saying, oh, murder, murder, murder. That's what your typical conspiracy theorist nutcase does.
Right.
I'm doing this because I was in the middle of it. I saw what happened. I saw heard what people were saying, and Courtney's own attorney was highly suspicious of this. Somebody that had known her for several years and worked with her and talked to her all the time and traveled with her, and yet she was suspicious and telling me privately. She could have been disbarred for what she did. So it was emotional for me, especially to the extent that I have kids, I have grandkids, I even have a great-granddaughter now. And to see and hear about these kids committing suicides boyfriend and girlfriend holding hands and writing a letter and then turning on Nirvana music and jumping off a cliff in Pacific Palisades, things like that were coming across regularly. And to this day, I still get emails from young